known universe for all we know. And these unassuming rocks are the most powerful pieces of forensic evidence the planet has ever seen. They convict, beyond a reasonable doubt, the killer of almost all life on Earth. 96% of everything in the oceans. 70% or more of everything on land. At a time full of bizarre and wondrous creatures.
Sometimes a whole bunch of things go away all at once. That's what we call a mass extinction. And mass extinctions beg questions.
It's called the Permian extinction, or the Great Dying. And it's by far the worst of the 5 major mass extinctions in our fossil record.
Everything seems to die out in a very, very short period of time.
And only recently have scientists found the smoking gun. A really smoky smoking gun that brought it all crashing down. The story of life on Earth is an epic saga of evolution and extinction. Turn back the clock several 100 million years, and we find many bizarre life forms thriving beneath vast ancient seas. But massive shifts in the Earth's crust and a series of mysterious catastrophes soon produced the first 2 of 5 major mass extinction events that wipe out more than 75% of all life on our planet. By the start of the Permian period, another massive change is taking shape. One that will finally allow life to thrive on land.
In the Permian, the continents have all come together to form this gigantic supercontinent called Pangaea. So you could basically walk from Cape Town to Beijing to Boston, you know?
Initially, most of the magic in the Permian isn't on land. Pangaea is surrounded by a single super ocean. Panthalassa. And though much of its depths remain a mystery, where the continental shelf creates shallows, fossils reveal a world where life runs riot. Reefs have finally recovered from the previous mass extinction that ended in the Devonian period. Coral and sponges are flourishing, as are nautilus-type creatures called ammonites.
You would have just loved scuba diving in the Permian. There's corals, there's cephalopods. You still have trilobites that evolved back 540 million years ago.
The lobed-finned fish that gave rise to us landlubbers have disappeared, from the seas at least. They've walked onto land and into an amphibious lifestyle, like Tiktaalik. But new bony fish, rays and sharks thrive. One almost unbelievable creature, the helicobrian, swims in search of prey, a shark with a circular saw of a mouth.
It basically had this whirl of teeth mounted in its lower jaw, and it would slam into its upper jaw, and it was a slicing mechanism. It swam around in the sea and just chopped stuff in half, and then came back and ate it.
One of the latest saw blade fossils found, called a tooth whorl, points to a creature that grew to 40 feet. It may be devoid of sea monsters, but on land, the cool, dry continent of Pangaea breeds life of its own.
All the continents are together, right? And so what happens is that in the coastal part of the world, you have these swamps. And in the middle of Pangaea, because it's so far from the sea, it becomes quite dry. And so reptiles are favored because they seal in their body fluids, they lay their eggs on land, they bury them.
It'll be 100 million years before the first true mammals appear. But their surprisingly reptilian-like ancestors, like these pelycosaurs, with their flamboyant sails, have already begun to strut their stuff.
What you got are animals that look like a big iguana with a great big sail on its back. It's likely that these sails were for either impressing the other sex or for moderating heat.
Placid plant eaters like dicynodonts rip through vegetation across Pangaea with bony beaks. They come in dozens of species, from the size of rats to rhinos. But no doubt, many are on the meal plan for some of the day's largest predators. Like the world's first saber-toothed carnivore, the voracious gorgonopsid, and Titanophonius, or Titanic murderer, at 15 feet long, one of the largest predators of its day.
And so you had a food chain there, plants, herbivores, predators, all living in the Permian in relatively warm conditions on the globe at that time.
Like their prey, these monsters were incredibly successful until they weren't.
$250 million years ago is the major mass extinction of all time, when you lose about 96% of the species of life on land, in the sea, animals, plants, forests. Everything seems to die out, again, in a very short period of time.
The evidence for the great dying is rock solid. The fossil-rich layers of the Permian, chock full of ammonites, snails, and clams, end abruptly some 250 million years ago. Above, for millions of years, lie black, blank shale, a sign of empty, dead oceans. The cause of the dying has been a bit more controversial.
And some people think that there was an impact of an asteroid or comet at that time. Some people think that it was volcanic eruptions that caused the climate to change. Other people think that it might be more mundane things like sea level changing.
Then, beginning in around 2008, things started to come into clearer focus. In a place called the Siberian Traps in modern-day Russia. That's where our infamous rocks come in. The result of perhaps the most devastating volcanic event ever. Where over 700,000 cubic miles of lava flowed from the center of the Earth. Enough to fill the Grand Canyon 7 times.
Tremendous amounts of lava coming out of fissures and cracks in the Earth and spreading across a very wide area, forming this huge plateau, thousands of feet thick, one lava flow on top of another. It may be in as short as 100,000 years or even less than that.
Scientists already knew that these massive eruptions occurred around the time of the Great Dying, but have only recently pinpointed the dates.
It's interesting, we know the time of the extinction event very accurately because there are volcanic ash layers right at the time of the mass extinction. Those have been dated very carefully, 252 million years ago. And the date of the Siberian basalts turns out to be 252 million years. So could it just be a coincidence that the biggest mass extinction happened at the same time as this huge outpouring of lava, which doesn't happen for tens of millions of years between events. I think it's too good to just be a coincidence.
It's more like a smoking gun.
Smoking gun. That one's easy. There's no evidence for any other trigger for this mass extinction. The dates line up, the volume of volcanic rock lines up with something. If you have that much volcanic rock coming out, there's going to be a problem.
And the rocks themselves also hold clues as to just how bad it was. Trapped inside are bubbles of gas from the eruption, traces of the trillions of tons of carbon dioxide that got belched out of the molten heart of the Earth and into the atmosphere.
You put more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's a greenhouse gas, it warms the atmosphere, but it also causes the seas to become more acidic.
And that is going to make it very difficult for a creature that depends on calcite to make their shell, because that will dissolve in low pH systems.
It was a complete horror show. 90% of all life wiped out. Nearly a factory reset for the Earth.
The world was not a pleasant place at that time, no.
So there were a lot of losers in the Permian-Triassic extinction. I mean, basically a lot of our friends that have been with us for the entire Paleozoic, things like trilobites, the last trilobite goes. Lots of these earlier marine organisms that they've survived through much of the earlier extinctions can make it through.
But as always, life finds a way. Lots of major groups still survived. Cephalopods, reptiles, certain fishes, and trees all managed to survive the Great Dying. And the world they inherit is a very different place.
It was a bad time, but thank goodness for the Permian extinction, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. I don't think we'd be able to compete with some of the things that were happily living there beforehand.
In the next era, the Triassic, reptiles will expand their dominion to rule the air, sea, and land, along with the first true mammals. And for that, we should all be very grateful.